everyone, and welcome to episode 3 of the Chetori podcast. My name is Nader.
And I'm Shayan.
And we're very excited to have you listening to today's episode. Thank you so much to everyone who's shown support to us, who's liked our posts, who's shared our episodes with other people. We really appreciate it. I wanted to reiterate it again. If there's anything you think we could do better, any topics you want us to cover, or anything we can do differently, go ahead and send us your feedback to the Chetori Pod on Instagram. That's CHETORIPOD. Today's a very special episode because we have our first ever guest on the show, Miss Diba. Welcome to the show, Diba.
Hi, everyone. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much. Diba has lived both in Iran and America, and she is a practicing Muslim. She wears hijab both inside Iran and outside Iran. And we're very honored to have her with us today.
Thank you, Sai, so much. I'm so excited to be here, and let's get this conversation going.
Absolutely. So to start off today's episode, there is an article, and it was actually published a while ago, but I thought that it would be kind of interesting to discuss it on today's episode. This is from a website called TMJ News, tmj.news. It's sort of like I would say kind of pro-Iranian government news agency by a couple of people that felt like, I think in their view, the general media narrative is very biased. And so they wanted to sort of clear things up and show the truth. I thought it was interesting because I was seeing a lot of my friends who were sort of pro-Iranian government, particularly non-Iranians, would post their Instagram stories and share it. And I thought it was worth talking about this particular article. Is there anything you want to say before?
Yeah, who is it written by?
It's written by one of the people, Mrs. Braza, who's
she Iranian?
I think from her name she's probably Pakistani.
Okay.
I believe one of the people that is one of the main authors actually has lived in Iran for some time.
Oh, has she?
I don't know if it's this particular one or not,
okay.
though. But the article basically starts off, and the article is called "A Critique on Huda Khatebi and the Rise of Secular Liberal Activism Within the Muslim Community." So quite the mouthful.
Sounds like a fun one.
So basically, it starts off talking about how there's been these protests in Iran. This was published, I think, in September or October of 2022. There's been these protests in Iran, and in the view of the author, media outlets have been quick to weaponize Amini's death and generate a frenzy, primarily pushing a narrative of Iranians fighting for regime change. And in their opinion, in the author's opinion, activists within the West, and even particularly the Western Muslim community, sometimes are not following what they define as kind of true Islamic values and activism.
Interesting. Okay.
Now, one such activist who rose to the occasion, I'm quoting directly from the article, was Huda Khatebi. Huda is an Iranian-American writer and community organizer who does a wide array of work in politics and fashion. She was quick to leap onto this anti-Iran media frenzy, claiming Amini was beaten by Gasht-e Ershad without backing up her accusations with evidence.
And Gasht-e Ershad being the morality police.
The morality police. And we extensively discussed this during our first episode.
Yes.
Going back to the article, I quote, "Meanwhile, the Director General of Forensic Medicine in Tehran states there are no signs of skull fracture, bleeding, or rupture of Amini's internal organs. Despite evidence pointing to Amini's natural death, authorities in Iran are still actively investigating the circumstances behind the situation." Very charitable of them. "It is questionable as to why Huda was so quick to join a hate-fueled campaign that is not even backed up by any subsequent evidence."
Well, maybe the reason why she expressed her opinion the way she did was because this lady, Mahsa Amini, should have never been arrested in the first place and should have never been brought into a police station over something as dumb as just having a few strands of hair sticking out of her hijab. Imagine.
It's kind of funny because when this article was written, okay, sure, let's say that they have questions about whether Amini was killed by the police or died of natural causes somehow, but there's dozens of videos of the police quite violently beating up protesters.
Yeah, we've all seen them.
They pick up some woman and throw her, and her head hits the sidewalk, and it's like if she wasn't gonna have a concussion, now she 100% will have a concussion.
Or even they just try to force someone into the van, and if they're not complying, so they start beating on her, and they're having the call for backup, and these other people come in and start beating her and throw her into the van. Like, there's so many of these type of videos.
Yeah, so maybe it shouldn't be so questionable why someone would join a campaign. I don't think it's particularly hate-fueled to be outraged
Yeah,
at
I mean, we have a right to
why
be outraged.
these atrocities are happening. Just like I think many people in the West are outraged by, let's say, police violence against people of color,
Yes.
and no one really calls that a hate-fueled campaign, even if, let's say, the particular details of a specific incident might be under question. But the larger issue still stands that the police force uses disproportionate violence against people of color to a point that is ridiculous. And similarly here, I think there is no doubt that the Iranian government is using violence against women to enforce this dress code,
Yeah.
when many people don't want to, and people are getting hurt. And when people protest against it, they're shut down.
And they have a right to be upset.
Now, continuing, and it's funny, Huda Khatebi was absolutely attacked left and right by many of the people on the Iranian right and many of these diaspora people because she wears a hijab. And because they basically said that, well, she's a representative of the Islamic Republic, she's associated with this group called Nayak, and they hate her. And now the Muslims also, at least the people in this article, are also attacking her and saying, no, how dare she attack the Iranian government. Continuing the article, one of the things that this article really takes issue with, and the core problem is that, quoting from the article, in a recent Instagram post, Huda also justified her support for the burning of the hijab, comparing it to burning the Israeli flag. And then the article says, the attempted demolition of a religious symbol as sacred as the hijab is not comparable to the burning of a flag that represents a century-old illegal settler colonial entity. There is nothing courageous about trying to prove a point through burning a symbol that is sacred to Muslims around the world. Hijab in itself has been a symbol of resistance, particularly against a society that seeks to capitalize on women and use female sexuality as a commodity. So let's take a second here.
Okay.
Now, Diba, you wear a hijab. Mm-hmm. You're wearing a hijab right now.
Yes, proudly.
How did you feel as a hijabi Iranian woman when you saw some videos of some teenagers burning their hijabs in the streets?
Well, I think first of all, I just want to start out with, giving my respect to Miss Raza who wrote this article. As a woman, I would never want to tear down another woman. However, I would like to say that I feel like they are writing this article from a very closed-minded point of view. And I don't know Miss Raza, but I would like to also know if she wears hijab, did she choose to, or did the government force her to? So that's a question for Miss Raza and for all you guys that are listening to think about. Now, with that being said, to answer your question, which was...
How did you feel when you saw... Because there were videos, I think we all saw them, of people burning the hijab. That there's no doubt about.
Yes. I think the first instant that I saw the video, it did catch me by surprise because I was like, oh, wow, this is an article that I wear also on my head and it's getting burned. Well, that makes it almost for a second, it felt like a personal attack. I was like, wow, an article of my clothing is getting burned. But I sat down and I tried to think of this logically and I opened my mind, which I really ask people to do. To not look at it from such a closed-minded point of view, especially respectfully if you're non-Iranian. I think that it made me think that these people they're not burning the hijab. They're burning this article of clothing that is almost something that not almost actually, it is something that can kill them. It's supposed to be a beautiful article of clothing to shield a woman, to protect a woman. However, I think it's something that now chokes a woman to death. And they are burning the idea of what this thing that was supposed to be beautiful is now an element that could cause them to die in the country that they live in. And quite frankly, they probably have no choice, to leave.
When you've been to Iran before, so you chose to wear hijab. Did everyone around you and your family and friends, do they also feel the same way as you do?
Are you asking, do they want to wear the hijab?
Yeah.
Or, there's a lot of people that don't. And there's a lot of, devout Muslims that, choose not to wear the hijab. And that's okay. That, again, is no one's business but themselves. And that's between themselves and their God.
Regardless of kind of taking, I think, what is Islam's official hook on this.
Right.
That's one thing. What is the religious ruling on something? But another thing is, okay, let's say someone doesn't want to wear it, right? How do they feel when the government says they have to? And they have to go outside every day?
I mean, I can't even imagine because I chose to wear the hijab, and I can't even imagine someone forcing me to wear it. I feel like it's already a struggle within itself to be a hijabi woman, whether you live in an Islamic country or you don't. I think it is a struggle. It's a beautiful struggle, but it is a struggle. And to have someone, especially a government, and now if you have sometimes people have family forcing them, that's within themselves and their own family, that's on them. But to have a government who doesn't even know you, who should have no involvement in like your person, your hoviyat. Sorry, I can't remember the English word. It's just, it's so uncalled for and it's so unnecessary and just.
Well, from their perspective, it's like, okay, well, Islamic Republic, it's an Islamic government. We're going to establish Islamic law, but then from the other perspective, it's like, okay, but I'm not really religious and I don't really want to wear it. So why do I have to wear this thing? Why is there a rule that said I have to wear the hijab? And if I don't, you're gonna throw me in a van, you're gonna hurt me or whatever. So a lot of Iranian women are, this is their mentality right now. It's like, okay, yeah, Islamic government, we didn't vote for this. 40 years ago, they voted for an Islamic government, and now we have to live with it. But we ourselves, not everyone, Iranian women, but these particular people who are protesting, they're like, yeah, I don't want to wear this article of clothing. Like, why do I have to do something you're telling me to do? Like, I don't want to do that.
And it's funny because maybe 40 years ago, when there hadn't been an Islamic Republic, some people have this theory that if a society is created and it is quote unquote purified by enforcing forced modesty, then the next generation will grow up to be more modest and follow certain values that society, that the government wants.
And it's not the case.
But that didn't work. We have 40 years of data to show that it didn't work.
It didn't work.
It didn't, because right now, compared to 10 years, the more we go forward, I think the less religious Iranians become. Now, I do take issue with some people who come and say the majority of Iranians reject Islam. I think it's exaggerated, but there is no doubt now compared to 20 years ago, now compared to 30 years ago, Iranians are less religious. The new generation is less religious.
I've had that same opinion as you. Every time I visit Iran, that's what I notice right away, how less religious people are becoming, especially the youth.
Yes, I agree. I think every trip I've had to Iran, I feel like I see people around me that are they're not only are they less religious, but they're questioning religion constantly and questioning everything and honestly disagreeing with it. And sometimes I feel like the odd one out by choosing to wear a hijab.
Even bad-mouthing religion.
Yes. Oh, yeah. 100%.
It's funny. Some of these same people that are religious will then come and feel a sense of victimization within Iran because sometimes people will make fun of them. Sometimes people, particularly right now, I think Chaudhary wearing women, they're outside of this, these protests. People sometimes act badly with them because they view them as representatives of the government. They don't like them, and it's funny because religious people themselves feel the consequences of forcing this religion on society to an extent, to a level. And also, as Diba said, there are people that are religious, but their level of extent of practicing at that moment is going to be different. And maybe that person is not at the stage that they're going to wear a hijab in the particular way that the government even wants.
Exactly. And it's like, okay, you force them, but now you're forcing them to wear it a very specific way, which is, it's not okay. And, and I think with that, I think we have to be open-minded to see where they're coming from, to see why they burned the hijab. They're not burning Islam. This fight has a lot more to do than with just a cloth. It's a fight for freedom. It's their cry for freedom. And I think
being told what to do, not being told what to wear.
And it's funny because sure, we might be offended by something happening, but by forcing these people and continually forcing them to do something they don't want to do, the consequences of that are just going to get worse and worse as time goes on.
Yeah.
Generation after generation, sure, the government can now try to find them and use artificial intelligence to take pictures and do more and more sophisticated stuff. You can make the facade last longer, but they're going to hate it more.
Yeah, they're only going to hate you more.
They're going to only hate you more. Whereas when people are left free, then people might actually choose that lifestyle that they're trying to do.
That's what I did. I was left free and I chose it. And I think when people write articles like this, they come from such a place of privilege. It's almost like they're tone deaf.
Right.
It's embarrassing. I mean this with all respect to Miss Raza and other people that write these articles.
And this is not meant as a personal attack to the particular author.
Of course, I mean this with all due respect. I'm saying it's embarrassing. Please know your place and know where you're coming from, and also realize how tone deaf you sound.
Now, continuing, speaking of tone deaf, the rest of the article. So first, initially, it says that one of the big criticisms is they're attacking a religious symbol. Continuing now, quoting from the article, the actions of attacking Islamic symbols, even if they are being spread by those who consider themselves Muslims, are promoting ideas against the very fundamentals of the religion. Huda uses the same narrative enforced by the West by stating Iran has weaponized faith through the implementation of laws that govern an Islamic society. Basically, exactly what we just said.
Yes.
Huda says that too, and the author is saying that that's not correct. And then the author continues, this argument, rooted in favor of the Western ideology, completely negates the fact that the Islamic Republic itself would not exist without the majority of the people voting in favor, and the laws outlining modesty are a critical part of an Islamic society. I think there's a grammar error there too, but let's not get into that. Okay, so this is a key part of the argument that this article is making. And again, it's not just this particular person. This is a school of thought that is seen a lot, particularly among Western Muslims, particularly among Western Shias, and particularly among non-Iranian Western Muslim Shias. First of all, it says that the fact that you're saying that weaponizing faith, this is rooted in favor of Western ideology. I take issue though. What does this have to do with Western ideology?
Yeah.
We're saying that in 40 years of Iranian history, or 43, or how many years it's been since 1979, this has not worked. There was an idea, and maybe let's give charity to the people that tried this idea. Let's say they were great people. But it didn't work. It didn't succeed. We can see after 40 years it didn't work. The new 2 generations, 3 generations later, they hate them. And they're not in any way what Islam would define as modest. So how is that ruled in favor of Western ideology? That's just experience of Iranians. And then it's saying that because per the author's claim, the Islamic Republic exists with the majority of the people voting in favor of it, then this is okay. Now, how many times, Shayan, has there been an election to see, do the majority of people support the Islamic Republic?
0.
That was once. It didn't happen once.
Oh, you talking about when they voted for that 43 years ago?
Yes, 43 years ago, after the Iranian Revolution, there was a referendum.
Afterwards, yeah.
And you had a yes or no choice. Islamic Republic, yes or no. And most of these people did not really know what Islamic Republic meant, but there had been some stuff given to them.
Yeah.
They liked it. I don't think there's any doubt that the overwhelming majority of people 43 years ago voted for it.
Yeah, and that was 43 years ago.
They wanted to
A lot
change.
has changed since then.
But why should people's grandfathers or parents, depending on how much I guess your age is different than your parents, why should that bind the choices of a previous generation? Should that bind the people of today? And people might come and say, "Oh, well, people still participate in elections." Just because people participate in elections, in my opinion, that doesn't mean if they're giving a choice between Islamic Republic and not Islamic Republic, they choose Islamic Republic.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe you're choosing between bad and worse.
Right.
In the elections for Rouhani, there are quite a few people that voted for Rouhani, or other people that may not have supported the Islamic Republic itself. They just thought that reform is a better path than regime change. The most recent elections, less than 50% of the eligible population voted.
Yes.
I think like 13% of those people that voted, they had like blank invalid votes. If you actually look at the percentage of people that voted for that president, it was
very low.
It was not the majority of society. and they'll make these claims, and I'm sure you've seen it, that there'll be like official protest days, and they'll show a video of 10,000 people, 20,000 people protesting. Again, that doesn't mean the majority of people show this. Mm-hmm. Can I say definitively that the majority of Iranian society is against the Islamic Republic? I don't know.
There's no stats.
Yeah.
We need to look at the numbers at the end of the day.
But to say that the majority of, just because one vote happened over 4 decades ago, that means that until the day of judgment, the majority of people support this. It's just absolutely untrue. And in continuing this line of thinking, this is making me laugh. The article says, in another post, Huda writes, "Down with all oppression, from the Shah to the Rahbar, from the king to the leader of the republic. This incorrectly conflates the Shah, a leader of an overthrown and widely recognized corrupt monarchy, with the current supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, who remains revered by the majority of society. It is inappropriate to compare a system that was overthrown by the people to a system that is currently maintained by the majority.
How do you know it's the majority? Like, where are you getting this number from?
If it was maintained by the majority, maybe they wouldn't need to come out with sticks every 6 months and start beating up people with tear gas.
Why are they tearing down posters of Ayatollah Khamenei? I don't get it. So, I mean, if the majority, like, why are the people doing that? Why are people in the streets protesting?
And I think, I don't know, I just think this idea that because someone was overthrown, then they were wrong. I mean, wasn't Mossadegh overthrown also? Weren't there plenty of people that the CIA overthrew in the past 50 years? Suddenly, because they were overthrown, they're wrong? I agree with that slogan. How do you feel about that slogan?
Diva, what do you think?
I just, again, with all due respect, it just sounds tone deaf. I really want to know, did this person go home to home in Iran and ask everyone, so what do you believe? No, they didn't. There is no stats. It's a mix. And to come and write this article and say this, it's wrong, and it's spreading false news.
I wonder how many people this person talked to in Iran. Like, how many people did you go and interview, have a conversation with? Have you even visited Iran and talked to, just a normal person?
When you talk even with pro-government people in Iran, and you sit down with them, you get deep in conversation, a lot of them will say that they disagree with the way certain things are. They disagree with internet censorship. A lot of the younger people will come and say, yeah, no, we don't think this is the right way of doing it. Or executions. Or the way that the government just goes around and does things and doesn't apologize for it. And it's to just make a general statement that, well, the supreme leader is loved by the majority of society. Then therefore, this is incorrect to conflate the Shah. No one is saying, by the way, it's funny because the Shah supporters also don't like this slogan. And they'll say, well, how dare you, the Shah was bad, but he was not nowhere near as bad as the Islamic Republic. I think the point of the slogan is, we're not saying, one side of the scale is more or less. We're just saying that a dictator, a single person that has all the power and is unaccountable, that is wrong. I don't think that's Western. I don't think that's Eastern. I don't think that's inherently Islamic or non-Islamic.
Makes sense. I mean, this slogan kind of makes sense a little bit.
The thing is saying we don't want one person to be unaccountable, have all the power, and just stay there until the end of their life. And I think a lot of Iranians will even Iranians that maybe they'll say that we don't want immediate regime change.
Yeah.
They will agree with that statement. So continuing, the article talks about how true to the center of secular liberal activism, Hoda's statements blur the lines between truth and falsehood. This allows her activist ideology to directly align with the West's anti-Iran defamation campaign. So this is where, again, very common argument, right? Yeah. This has to do with imperialism. The West doesn't like Iran. America doesn't like Iran. And therefore, kind of criticizing the Iranian government's oppression is being in line with that imperialist campaign. Which, how do you feel about that, Sean?
Yeah, it doesn't make sense. Like, that does not make sense at all. I mean, look at what happened in the U.S. a few years ago with the George Floyd incident. How many countries came and said, "Hey, like, that's not okay. You can't act like that," or whatever. So does that have to do anything with imperialism? Yeah, it doesn't make sense.
I think Iran's supreme leader actually directly gave a speech and he criticized the American police for killing George Floyd. So are those people that are in the streets with Black Lives Matter T-shirts or doing whatever they're protesting, are they being pro-Iranian suddenly?
I mean, apparently.
It's
It seems like.
I think governments are inherently going to take advantage of any situation. If the West right now is a rival to the Iranian government, if the Iranian government gets weakened, they will clap. They will be happy. Does that mean it's the reason why that's happening? I don't think so. This seems to reduce Iranians also to like these mindless people that are either righteous pro-government people or they're deceived by the West. It's impossible to be an Iranian and simply disagree with the way things are happening and just want to protest. And that's frustrating. And I think one of the biggest issues in the country is people feel like their voice isn't heard because they're treated like kids.
Actually not heard. Yeah, they're shut out from internet. They're shut out from almost every source of communication. And if they talk, they're killed. So
yeah, they're thrown into prison. Who knows what happens to them.
It's very dangerous speaking there. I mean, the cry for help, burning a hijab it's just a small cry for help compared to the amount of I want to say abuse they're taking.
Just think about like the protests that take place in the West and compare it to the protests that happens in Iran, and how the government reacts in the West, and how the government, like U.S. government, reacts to these protests in the West, and how the Iranian government reacts to the protests in Iran. Just look at the way they handle these situations.
How are you saying the U.S. government reacts to protests in the U.S.?
They're not out there with guns and rubber bullets, or like, okay, they are out there sometimes, or maybe a protest gets a little out of hand, and so they have to
They're
send
there for
security
safety.
For safety reasons. But they're not out there with AK-47 shooting directly into protesters, or throwing people into vans, taking them to the station, to the police station, and the parents not hearing from them for weeks, not knowing what happens to them. Or they'll be like, oh, well, this lady that was arrested, she actually committed suicide in the prison.
And this other person that just happened to be arrested at this time, that thinks actually they didn't die because of us. It's actually they were bitten by a dog.
Yeah. Or this person that got arrested in a protest. She suddenly dies, and then here, by the way, here's her body. Here's her body. You can have it.
And here's her body, you can have it, but actually we're gonna bury it in this other location.
We're gonna bury it real quick, but it's located here just in case you want to go visit.
I want to go say hi. But I have to say, something as simple, and what you guys said is so true, but something as simple as when you're in America, you can turn on the news and you see what's going on outside.
Yeah.
In Iran, you turn on the news, we got Mohammed baking a cookie. And everything is okay. Yeah. It is fabulous. We're celebrating Shabi Alda. Yeah. We're all partying. Oh, wait, Iran's in playing the World Cup. Oh, my God, they won. Yeah. Let's have a rave in the streets. But guess what? You can't have a rave because it's not Islamic, but let's have a rave in the streets. It doesn't add up. And quite frankly, it's so frustrating. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, the censorship is just crazy.
And that doesn't mean that I don't think CNN and Fox News are the best sources either.
Right.
I'm not saying
but
that America's perfect.
There's Instagram. You can load Instagram.
If someone sits down, you'll say, oh my God, well, Trump was, censored and stuff. But there's a million people on Twitter that are saying narratives completely against the American government.
Definitely.
And they're not arrested.
Yeah, they're not.
Or like there's a guy
disappear all of a sudden.
There's some sort of freedom of speech. Even if it's quote unquote freedom of speech, it's freedom of speech.
Definitely, yeah.
Right now, by uploading this podcast, I do not feel at risk of getting immediately raided by the American government. I
well,
yeah. But
if you're listening, we love you.
I don't feel at risk, even though I might quite frankly disagree with a lot of the stuff the American government does, and I don't support that.
Right.
And I don't support them, and I don't think they're the best people in the world. And as a person of Iranian heritage, I wish Iran is successful in a lot of things, but you got to tell the truth when it is. I don't think it's a liberal based idea, and secular, like all these things. Like, it's just it's actually funny. The Iranian government's, some of their totalitarian stuff is very 20th century, Stalinist or totalitarian. It's not something that is taken suddenly from like a hadith or the Quran or something like that. But anyway, the article continues. At one point, it says that, well, how dare Hoda not give a response to the burning of alams, which were flags, which are,
I never saw any burning of alams or anything like that.
Me too.
There was at the beginning of the protest, I remember, in the pro-government, like social media channels, they started spreading news that, well, Chaudhry women who observe like very intense hijab, they're getting beaten up. And they showed some religious places which are getting burned. I think I did see some seminaries, one or two did get burned.
But explain to the audience why people would attack such places.
Well, because the government is affiliated with religious institutions, then I think it's wrong. I disagree with it. If I was in the street and someone was attacking a seminary, I would tell them not to. But
the seminary is connected to the government, and the government funds these seminaries to promote.
When the government
back up the government,
that's the problem. That's where, again, we're not. A lot of people think that secularism is just because religion is seen as something that's wrong, or religion doesn't have a place in modern society. Well, no, it's not just that. It's also when the government funds religious institutions, those religious institutions become responsible in the eyes of the people.
Then they're going to get attacked
for everything, and stuff like this happens. I don't agree with it. I think it's wrong. I think the vast majority of actually the clergy are against the government. And I've been to and I've talked with a lot of them.
Vast majority of the clergy?
Yes, I think
You really think that?
maybe vast is a thing, but a very large group of them
Okay.
are not. I've actually heard more support for like the philosophy of secularism in Qom than I think any other Iranian city.
Really?
But
Okay.
There's also more of a atmosphere of, I think, making everyone shut up in the religious institutions as there is anywhere else, because they're very, very tightly controlled. But anyway, look, just because this is what I also think, just because because groups of teenagers are just roaming around with no leaders, just in anarchy doing things. If one of them does something wrong, that does not represent the entire movement. Mm-hmm. And it does not mean that, okay, anyone that's against the government is inherently part of this. I don't think so. Just like, isn't the whole argument that just because one cop beats up a person, that doesn't mean all cops are like that?
Yeah.
Well, then the same thing applies. Okay, if someone burned down an alam or someone attacked a masjid or Hoza Elmiya,
Yeah.
okay, it's wrong. And they shouldn't do that. That doesn't represent everybody. And then the article continues and talks a little bit about some religious history. It's kind of funny. They talk about Imam Ali, and they don't notice that a big part of kind of Shia history is that Imam Ali at one point at the Battle of Siffin fights an army that the opposing army put pages of the Quran on their spears, saying that this is sacred, and if you attack us, you're attacking Islamic sacred symbols.
Kind of interesting, right?
Yeah, it was just exactly kind of what's happening here, but we'll move on. They continue. Ultimately, this being the truth mixed with falsehood only goes to further highlight the importance of understanding the causes one wishes to serve and realizing her voice actually strengthens the goals of the West far more than it defends Islamic values. So apparently, if you saying that you don't like the way you're being treated by the government,
You're on the side of the West.
if it strengthens the goals of the West, then you're wrong. So that's like saying that, well, if Uyghurs in China are being killed, and if we speak up against that, well, because the West doesn't like China, then you're supporting the West, and therefore you're not allowed to do that. It's just you can reach really.
It's so close-minded.
When the South African apartheid happened and the South African government, basically treated black people as second-class citizens, and a large part of the West was against that too. But apparently, because the West was against it, then the West supports it, and we can't be. It's this weird situation where all your values are taken from the opposite of the West. Mm-hmm. And nowhere, by the way, in Islam does it say that the West is the enemy. I mean, what if the West were Muslims? Then what would they say? Their entire religious identity is on this opposition to a geopolitical group that history has shown. Geopolitical groups, they change religion, they change ideologies.
Over a long period of time.
The Roman Empire, used to be pagan. It became Christian. It completely changed.
Yeah.
Things changed. Like this notion of mixing geopolitics with religion, to me, is also problematic. It continues. It gives some religious history. We don't have to read all of it. Talks about Malcolm X a little bit. And then sorts of concludes, again, the United States and their allies care less about justice, but rather have weaponized Amini's death in an attempt to weaken the system of governments that Iran abides by, velayat faqih. Okay. Suddenly, the Iranian people protesting, they have no power here.
Yeah.
And it's the West. This is actually the United States and their allies, right? Not even the West. It's a particular group within there. To me, this is exactly the problem. If the Iranian people, or part of the Iranian people, to be fair, not every single person, part of them disagree with what their government is doing, whether that's on hijab, whether that's the way that the government spends its money, whether that's military groups that the government supports, the nuclear program, or other things. I'm not saying I'm for or against these, but there are people that are against all of these.
Right.
That does not mean that they are the West. They have a right to have these debates.
Yeah, I mean, they're Iranian at the end of the day. They have a right to, say what they want to say or protest or whatever they want to do. It's not for a non-Iranian, article writer to come and say what the Iranian people should or shouldn't do. It has nothing to do with you. Iran is for Iranians at the end of the day. The Iranians are the ones who will decide which direction they want their country to go, not anyone living outside of the boundaries of Iran.
And by the way, this is not just something that Muslims do. I also see it among leftist, sort of anti-imperialist type people, which is funny because I would personally consider myself an anti-imperialist. But some Western anti-imperialist is just some random white guy in like Iowa or something, or black, or it doesn't have to be just a white guy. It's a random American And they'll say, well, because they don't support America's foreign policy, well, these people are supporting NATO, or they'll turn it about, Russia versus America or something. And it's absurd because people should have the right to determine their own identity outside of these geopolitical struggles. And wasn't one of the very slogans of the Iranian Revolution in the first place, neither Eastern nor Western, right? It was not one or the other. It was saying we don't care about these. We're not going to be a Soviet state. We're not going to be an American state. Right. We're just going to do what we want better.
Not going to be a Soviet puppet. Not going to be a U.S. puppet.
So just concluding this particular article, if our own spaces censor the voices that have clearly outlined truth and falsehood and replace it with the likes of Hoda Khatami, who's now apparently like a very disgusting, horrible person.
Sounds like they made her the villain.
Yeah, they're the villain. I mean, the entire article's attacking her. Yeah. We are doing a disservice to the younger generations who will champion a confused Islamic identity.
And I think the biggest confusing Islamic identity is what the Islamic Republic is forcing on Iranian people.
Yeah, definitely.
That's the most confusing thing. So, again, check your facts.
It is imperative that our youth can distinguish and follow faith-centered activism when they see it. This can only be done through a fundamental understanding of divine guardianship, wilaya, and the importance of spirituality within any social reform. So again, basically, the criteria of good versus bad is, do you support velayat? And velayat just means velayat al-faqih.
The divine guardian, by the way.
It's funny. Not every Iranian, even Shia traditional Ayatollah, supports the Islamic Republic.
Nope.
Not every Iranian Shia Ayatollah has historically supported velayat al-faqih or velayat al-faqih mutlaqeh, which is absolutist velayat al-faqih. This is one theory among many theories that suddenly became the group of people that won the Iranian Revolution.
Yes.
And got all the power at the end of the power struggle.
There's very notable Ayatollahs who oppose this type of rulership.
Yeah, and they've spoken up against it. And to make it seem as if this is the only Islamic opinion, there's one argument which will say, well, first of all, let's separate religion from the state. And actually, it doesn't matter what an Ayatollah says. Okay, that's one argument. But even within just Muslims, it's not the only opinion. There are plenty of grand Ayatollahs today and in the past that were against the government, that were jailed by the government, that were in exile, that were threatened, some of them today, more prominent, less prominent. There's plenty of religious people that are living outside the country. There's a special clerics court, which is just for clerics, and usually it goes after people who are political opponents. And
within
Iran, the notion that if you're a Muslim and if you're a Shia Muslim, you have to support the Islamic Republic is just ridiculous. It's not true. That doesn't mean, I also want to say, there are people that support that. And they have their reasoning. And I don't think they're a bunch of lobbyists or they're paid. I think they have their reasons. I may disagree with some of them, but I think we have to learn to respect people for having their opinions. But I also think to say that people's disagreeing with particularly oppressive policy of the Islamic Republic, saying that, well, they're just, puppets of the West, this is not Islamic activism, to me is absurd.
I agree.
So we talked a little bit about non-Iranian Muslims who really zealously support the Iranian government. But I think to close off today's episode, there's also quite a few Iranians, particularly kind of older boomer Iranians.
Who are religious,
live outside the country usually, but are very, very strong in their support of the Iranian government.
Yeah.
And some opposition people, will come and say, well, these guys are lobbyists, they're being paid. But in my experience, that's not the case.
Yeah, it's not the case.
They're entirely genuine in what they feel. But the reason why they do this is, in their mind, the Islamic Republic is good.
It's sacred.
It's sacred, exactly. It's the manifestation of good and sacred.
Because they were there. A lot of them were there when this event took place. I'm talking about the revolution. So they view this revolution as something they brought into this world.
It's almost their
child.
Their baby.
And this child has gone through a lot of ups and downs. It saw the 8-year war. It survived the 8-year war. It saw all the sanctions. Now maybe they saw some good things that happened during the Islamic Revolution when it comes to Iran.
But they live outside the country.
So they have this very genuine, heartfelt love towards the government.
They've only seen the good sides, I think. because they left. I'm assuming they left, and they left around the time things got a little messy and their child started throwing tantrums. And that's what's happening. This is a big, 43-year tantrum, and they're just watching. Imagine watching your child from like daycare, from like the window, and you're like, oh, they're so cute, but like inside, the other children are dying, and like the child named Iran is beating up everyone, beating up the teachers.
The teacher sends a report card, and they're like, hey, like this stuff's happening, and they just dismiss it, and they say, no, it's fake news.
No, fake news.
No, my child is great.
They're golden. I brought them into this world. I love them. You're watching it from a window.
Yeah.
But as long as you view the government as good, again, and as their children, and not just as a group or people that are leading a nation. It's just a government, like the French government, like the Egyptian government, like the American government, and it can be good, it can be bad. But just because it has the word Islamic, and the people wear turbans, does not mean that they're a bunch of angels.
Definitely not.
Until they accept that, and as long as they have the first viewpoint, they're gonna justify almost anything. And any protest that happens, rather than being viewed as a sociological phenomenon, something that can be learned from, something that, right now it looks like these current protests probably, now you never know with Iran, but it looks like they're finishing.
Until something else happens.
Yeah, until something else happens. But they're just viewed, all right, this is over, back to normal.
Yeah.
Back to Mohammed baking that cookie on TV.
Yeah, but they don't learn, we're just back to the same dystopia. We don't learn that, society is changing and this is not working. And to me, it's dangerous. But again, these people are living outside the country, so how much power do they really have?
Very dismissive, yeah.
But in any case,
it's ignorant, respectfully.
Yes, respectfully, they're being very ignorant. Thank you everyone for listening to our episode today. I know we talked about a lot of controversial topics. We'd love to hear your opinion also about what you think about this subject, about what you think that we should say for future episodes. We would love it if you could share our podcast with other people, if you could rate it, only if you give it 5 stars though, on Spotify.
You sound like the Islamic Republic.
In that case, I'm a dictator. And
You're number one.
Gotta be 5 out of 5.
Only 5 out of 5 is acceptable. Right now we're on Google Podcasts and Spotify, and Instagram and YouTube. Thank you so much, and until next time, have a great time.
Bye guys.